They say blood is thicker than water, that family is everything, that the people who share your DNA will always have your back no matter what. But what happens when the truth is so shocking, so twisted, that it shatters every belief you've ever held about loyalty and love? I'm standing here today to tell you a story that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. A story about betrayal so deep it didn't just cut me. It tried to erase my daughter's entire existence from our family. I couldn't believe what I discovered, and honestly, I still can't some days. Picture this: a lavish baby shower, champagne towers, designer decorations, a room full of family celebrating my sister's pregnancy. My father stands up, raises his glass, and says with tears in his eyes, "Finally, I'm going to be a grandpa." The room erupts in applause while my 6-month-old daughter sleeps upstairs, forgotten, invisible, humiliated by her own grandfather's words. That moment was the dagger that exposed a wound I'd been ignoring my whole life. But it was just the beginning of the truth I was about to uncover. What I found when I started asking questions wasn't just favoritism or forgetfulness. It was a systematic campaign of revenge, sabotage, and theft that would shock anyone who believes families are supposed to protect each other. My sister Victoria wasn't just the golden child. She was my executioner, and she'd been destroying my life piece by piece for years while I blamed myself for being unloved. The infidelity to my identity, the lies told in my name, the career sabotage, the stolen inheritance meant for my daughter, every betrayal more shocking than the last. I was cheated out of promotions, lied about to family, backstabbed in ways I couldn't have imagined, all because I'd committed the crime of being happy outside her shadow. But here's what she didn't count on. I'm not the kind of person who stays silent when my child's legacy is stolen, and what happened next changed everything. This isn't just a story about family drama. This is about dignity, self-worth, and the line between justice and vengeance. It's about what happens when the truth is finally exposed, and karma comes collecting with interest. It's about payback that looks like consequences, and revenge that tastes like freedom. So if you've ever been the forgotten one, the dismissed one, the daughter or son who couldn't understand why nothing you did was ever enough, this story is for you. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your worth is to expose the betrayal, no matter how shocking, no matter how painful, no matter who falls when the truth finally comes to light. And trust me, when the golden child falls, the impact is seismic. What I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty, sibling rivalry, and how far someone will go to keep you invisible. The truth? It's more disturbing than any fiction, and the justice that followed was both beautiful and terrible in ways I never expected. So buckle up, because this story has more twists than anyone saw coming, and by the end, you'll be asking yourself the same question I ask every day. Where does justice end and revenge begin? They say family is everything, that blood runs thicker than water. But what happens when that same blood feels like poison in your veins? I was standing in the corner of my sister Victoria's baby shower, this massive, Pinterest-perfect event with champagne towers and a live violinist, when my father raised his glass and said the words that shattered me. "Finally, I'm going to be a grandpa." The room erupted in cheers while I stood there frozen, because my 6-month-old daughter, Lily, was sleeping upstairs in one of the guest rooms. We'd arrived late. Lily had fallen asleep in the car, and rather than wake her, we'd quietly put her down in a guest room. Most people didn't even realize we'd brought her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The betrayal cut through me like daggers, sharp and unforgiving. And suddenly every smile in that room felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My husband grabbed my hand, squeezing it so tight I thought my bones would crack, and I saw the fury in his eyes that mirrored my own humiliation. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue or a forgetful moment. This was erasure, deliberate and cruel. Victoria stood there glowing in her designer maternity dress, accepting congratulations like she was the first woman in history to get pregnant, while my baby girl existed as nothing more than a ghost in my father's mind. The truth hit me harder than anything I'd ever felt. I had been backstabbed by my own blood, and this moment was just the tip of an iceberg I'd been trying to ignore my entire life. Revenge wasn't even on my mind yet. I was still processing the sheer shock of being invisible. Everyone clinked their glasses and moved on to cake, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't pretend anymore that this was normal. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped chains around my ribs and was pulling them tighter with every passing second. I looked at Victoria, and for a split second I swear I saw something flicker across her face. Was it guilt? Satisfaction? I couldn't tell anymore. The woman I'd grown up with, shared a room with, told secrets to, had become a stranger who seemed to relish watching me disappear. And my father? He was already back to laughing with relatives, completely unaware, or worse, completely unbothered, that he'd just denied his own granddaughter's existence in front of 50 people. I excused myself and went upstairs to check on Lily, and when I saw her tiny face sleeping so peacefully, completely unaware of the injustice being done to her, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my daughter's dignity, her place in this family, her right to be seen and loved. The humiliation was suffocating, but underneath it, a fire was starting to burn, hot and righteous. I kissed Lily's forehead and whispered a promise. No one would ever make her feel invisible again, no matter what it cost me. When I came back downstairs, I plastered on a smile that felt like broken glass against my face, and I started watching, really watching, how everyone interacted with Victoria versus how they interacted with me. The difference was staggering, and suddenly, years of small moments started clicking into place like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind or too hopeful to see before. Every dismissive comment, every forgotten invitation, every comparison that left me on the losing end. It all made a sickening kind of sense now. I'd been living in a family drama where I was cast as the extra, and Victoria had the starring role. But I was only just beginning to understand how deep this betrayal really went. As the party continued around me, fake smiles and hollow congratulations echoing off the walls, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront anyone today. No, that would be too easy, too forgettable, too dismissible as an emotional outburst from the jealous sister. Instead, I was going to pay attention, gather the truth, and wait for the right moment. Because something told me this wasn't just about favoritism or a careless toast. Something much darker was lurking beneath the surface, and I was about to uncover a web of lies that would expose everything. Looking back, I realized the signs were always there, flashing like neon warnings I chose to ignore, because acknowledging them would mean accepting that my parents didn't love us equally. When Victoria turned 16, she got a brand new Audi with a red bow on top, posted all over social media like some kind of sweet 16 fairy tale. When I turned 16, I got a used Toyota Corolla with 90,000 miles on it and a congratulations card from the dollar store. My parents said they were being practical with me, teaching me responsibility and gratitude, but apparently those lessons didn't apply to my sister. The injustice of it burned, but I swallowed it down like bitter medicine, telling myself that material things didn't matter, that love wasn't measured in cars and gifts. But it wasn't just cars. It was everything. A systematic pattern of inequality that followed us from childhood straight into adulthood. Victoria went to an elite private university, full tuition paid, apartment in the city, monthly allowance that could have fed a small village. I went to the local state college, worked 2 jobs to cover what my partial scholarship didn't, and lived in a basement apartment with 3 roommates and a persistent mold problem. When I graduated with honors, my parents took me to Applebee's. When Victoria graduated middle of her class, they threw a garden party with catering and a photo booth. I told myself education was about the degree, not the celebration, but the humiliation of being treated like an afterthought was eating me alive from the inside out. Even our weddings told the story of 2 daughters living in completely different realities. Victoria's wedding was at an upscale vineyard, 300 guests, designer dress, live band, fireworks at midnight, the works. The pictures looked like something out of a luxury magazine, and my parents spared no expense, even taking out a loan to make sure their princess had her perfect day. My wedding? We had it at a local community center with 75 people, a DJ we found on Craigslist, and a dress I bought on sale at David's Bridal. My mom said they'd already spent so much on Victoria's wedding, and couldn't do the same for me, which was code for, "You're not worth the same investment." I smiled through it, convinced myself that intimate was better anyway. But the shame of being loved less publicly was a wound that never quite healed. The favoritism wasn't just financial, it was emotional, psychological, woven into every family gathering and milestone like poison thread through fabric. When Victoria announced her engagement, my parents cried tears of joy and immediately started planning. When I announced mine, they asked if we were sure and whether we'd thought it through. When Victoria got promoted at her marketing firm, my dad called everyone he knew to brag. When I became head nurse in the cardiac unit after years of night shifts and sacrifice, I got a "That's nice, honey," and a redirect to Victoria's latest Instagram post. I felt like I was screaming into a void where Victoria's whisper was heard as a symphony, and the betrayal of being invisible in my own family was crushing my spirit one day at a time. Every holiday, every birthday, every random Tuesday, the pattern repeated itself with mathematical precision. Victoria got thoughtful, expensive gifts chosen with care. I got generic gift cards and last-minute purchases that screamed, "Oh, right, you exist too." Victoria's accomplishments were framed and hung on walls. Mine were mentioned once and forgotten by dessert. Victoria's problems were family emergencies requiring immediate attention. Mine were inconveniences I should handle alone because I was so independent and capable. The gaslighting was subtle but effective. Whenever I tried to point out the inequality, I was told I was being jealous or ungrateful or making everything a competition. But I wasn't competing. I was just begging to be seen as worthy of the same love. By the time Lily was born, I'd built walls around my heart, convinced myself I'd made peace with being the forgotten daughter. But that toast at the baby shower demolished those walls in seconds, and suddenly I was looking at 32 years of systematic dismissal with fresh, angry eyes. This wasn't just favoritism. This was erasure, a deliberate choosing of one daughter's happiness over the other's dignity, and I'd enabled it by staying quiet, by being the easy one who didn't make waves. The shocking realization that my own family had treated me like a second-class citizen my entire life was almost too much to bear. But what came next would prove that the favoritism I'd endured was just the beginning of something far more sinister. About a week after the baby shower, I started noticing something strange. People in my family were acting weird around me, distant in a way that felt pointed and personal. My cousin Rachel, who I'd been close with since childhood, barely made eye contact at a family dinner and left early with some excuse about a headache. My Aunt Susan mentioned she was surprised I'd decided not to come to her anniversary party last month, but I never got an invitation to any anniversary party. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The confusion on her face was genuine, which meant someone had told her I'd declined an invitation I never received. The truth was starting to surface in scattered pieces, and each piece revealed a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. I started asking questions, casually at first, testing the waters to see how deep this went. My uncle mentioned he'd sent me a message about Thanksgiving plans that I never responded to, but I checked my phone, my email, my social media. Nothing. My grandmother said she'd been hurt that I didn't call her after her hip surgery, that Victoria had told her I was too busy with the baby to care, but I never even knew about the surgery. The isolation I'd been feeling wasn't accidental or in my head. It was constructed, deliberate, a web of lies designed to make me look like the selfish, distant family member who couldn't be bothered. Humiliation washed over me as I realized I'd been painted as the villain in a story I didn't even know was being written. Every missed connection, every awkward silence, every relative who'd grown cold suddenly made horrifying sense. Someone had been speaking for me, making decisions in my name, declining invitations and ignoring messages I never saw. The family drama I thought I'd been avoiding was actually a drama I'd been written into without my knowledge or consent, and the protagonist was nowhere near as kind as I'd always tried to be. I felt backstabbed in the most calculated way, not with a single confrontation I could defend myself against, but with 1,000 tiny lies spread over months or even years, each one building a wall between me and the people I loved. I sat down with my husband one night and started making a list of every strange interaction, every time someone had seemed hurt or distant for reasons I couldn't understand. The list grew longer than I expected. Missed birthday parties I'd supposedly been too good to attend, family group chats I was somehow left off of, messages sent to an old email address I hadn't used in years even though everyone had my current one. The pattern was undeniable. Someone was actively working to isolate me, to make me seem like the ungrateful, selfish daughter who'd abandoned her family. Karma was nowhere in sight, but the need for justice was starting to whisper in my ear, promising truth if I was brave enough to seek it. The shocking realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about favoritism or even cruelty. This was about replacement. Someone wanted me gone from the family narrative, erased not just from the present, but retroactively from memories and relationships I'd spent years building. I'd been lied about systematically, my character assassinated in conversations I wasn't present for, my absence explained away with fabricated excuses that made me look cold and self-centered. The betrayal was suffocating, a noose that had been tightening so slowly I hadn't noticed until it was almost too late. But I was noticing now, and the anger building inside me was sharp enough to cut through any remaining doubt. As I dug deeper, asking more pointed questions and comparing notes with the few family members who still seemed genuinely confused rather than hostile, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. This wasn't random chaos or miscommunication. This was orchestrated, planned, executed with a level of calculation that chilled me to my core. Someone close to me, someone who knew my passwords and my schedule and my relationships, had been systematically destroying my place in this family while I focused on building my career and raising my daughter. And as much as I didn't want to believe it, as much as it felt like the ultimate betrayal to even think it, all roads seemed to lead back to one person, Victoria. The real horror started when I got a call from my supervisor at the hospital asking why I'd sent such a concerning email to the board about refusing a promotion. My blood ran cold. I'd never sent any such email, never refused anything, and the promotion she was talking about was something I'd worked toward for 3 years. I demanded to see the email, and when she forwarded it to me, I felt like the ground had opened beneath my feet. It was sent from an email address that looked almost exactly like mine, just one letter different, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. And the tone was aggressive, unprofessional, completely unlike anything I'd ever write. Someone had impersonated me, torpedoed my career, and almost succeeded in making me look unstable and ungrateful to the people who'd been considering me for leadership. But it didn't stop there. Once I started looking, I found fake accounts everywhere. A digital maze of betrayal I couldn't believe was real. There was a Facebook profile with my name and an old photo of me, posting political rants and controversial opinions I'd never expressed, alienating friends and former colleagues who thought I'd lost my mind. There was a LinkedIn account sending inappropriate messages to connections, burning professional bridges I'd spent years building. Someone had been living a shadow version of my life online, saying and doing things designed to destroy my reputation while I was completely unaware. The infidelity to my identity, the violation of my digital self, was almost worse than any physical theft could have been. I started documenting everything with shaking hands, screenshots, email headers, timestamps that showed I was logged into my real accounts when the fake ones were active. The evidence was mounting, and with each new discovery, my humiliation transformed into something harder, colder, more focused. This wasn't just family drama or sibling rivalry anymore. This was criminal, a calculated campaign to sabotage my professional life and personal relationships. The truth started to look less like coincidence and more like the only way to stop someone from trying to erase my entire existence and replace it with a false narrative designed to make me fail. My husband suggested we contact the police, but I hesitated. What would I tell them? That my sister might be impersonating me online? I had suspicions, but not proof, and accusing Victoria without concrete evidence would only make me look like the jealous, unstable sister everyone apparently already thought I was based on those fake accounts. Instead, I reached out to my cousin Derek, who worked in IT security, and asked him to help me trace the digital footprints. He was shocked by what he found. IP addresses that matched locations Victoria frequented, metadata in profile photos that linked back to her devices, a pattern of activity that coincided perfectly with times I knew she had access to my information during family gatherings. The scope of the sabotage was breathtaking in its cruelty. Victoria hadn't just tried to isolate me from family. She'd tried to destroy my career, my friendships, my professional reputation, everything I'd built outside the family structure where she was the favorite. She'd created an alternate version of me online, a bitter, unstable, unprofessional version that bore my name but none of my character, and she'd been feeding that version into the world like poison into a well. I felt cheated out of opportunities I'd earned, lied about to people who mattered, backstabbed in ways I was only beginning to understand. The truth was more shocking than any fiction, and I was still uncovering new layers of betrayal. What Derek found next changed everything. Victoria had also accessed my real email account multiple times over 2 years. She'd gotten my password somehow, probably from watching me type during one of those family gatherings where she'd helped me with something on my laptop. She used the fake email to quickly deceive third parties like my hospital board, but she'd used my real account to monitor my messages, delete invitations, and gather information for her schemes. The email about the promotion cost me not just the position, but also the trust of colleagues who now questioned my judgment and stability. Victoria had reached into my professional life, the one place I'd built something entirely my own, away from family comparisons and favoritism, and she'd tried to destroy it from the inside. Justice was no longer just about family dinner tables and holiday gatherings. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth, my right to exist without someone systematically dismantling everything I touched. And as I gathered more evidence, I realized the digital sabotage was just one front in a war I hadn't even known I was fighting, and the next discovery would cut even deeper. I was going through old boxes in my mother's attic, looking for baby photos of Lily to compare with ones of me, when I found a list my grandmother had made before she died. It was titled, "For My Granddaughter Lily." My grandmother's handwriting was shaky but clear. The list detailed family heirlooms she wanted passed down: her pearl necklace, her mother's silver tea set, an antique music box that had been in our family for 4 generations, and a collection of first edition books she'd treasured. My heart swelled reading it, knowing my grandmother had thought of my daughter, had wanted her to have these precious pieces of our family history. But then I started looking for the items, and one by one, I discovered they were gone. Every single one, vanished without a trace. I confronted my mother first, keeping my voice steady even though panic was clawing at my throat. She looked confused, said Victoria had been organizing the estate items after grandmother died, taking inventory and keeping things safe until everyone decided what to do with them. But when I asked Victoria directly, she got defensive immediately, claiming she didn't know what I was talking about, that those items must have been misplaced during the move, or probably sold at the estate sale years ago. Her reaction told me everything: the way her eyes shifted, the slight pause before answering, the overly casual shrug. She was lying, and we both knew I knew it, but I didn't have proof yet, just a sickening certainty that my daughter's inheritance had been stolen. I couldn't believe someone could be so heartless, so calculated in their betrayal. These weren't just objects. They were connections to ancestors Lily would never meet, stories she deserved to hear, a legacy that was her birthright as much as anyone's in this family. The theft wasn't just about money or possessions. It was about erasing Lily from the family narrative entirely. denying her the tangible proof that she belonged, that she was part of something bigger than the present moment. Payback for what? I couldn't understand. What had I done except exist? Except have a child? Except try to build a life outside Victoria's shadow? The cruelty of it was suffocating. Then Derek, my IT cousin who'd helped trace the digital sabotage, suggested something that hadn't occurred to me. Check online marketplaces and estate sale websites. I spent hours searching, feeling more ridiculous by the minute, until suddenly there it was. Grandmother's pearl necklace, listed on an estate sale site from 8 months ago, the description matching perfectly down to the tiny clasp with the initials engraved. I dug deeper and found the silver tea set sold separately, the music box listed as antique French jewelry box for 3 times what it was worth. Each discovery felt like a dagger twisting deeper. Not just that the items were gone, but that Victoria had sold them for profit, turned Lily's legacy into cash she'd pocketed without a second thought. The evidence was mounting into an undeniable mountain of betrayal. I had my grandmother's list in her own handwriting, screenshots of the sold items with dates that matched perfectly with when Victoria had inventory access, and even found a receipt in an old email of my mother's that confirmed Victoria had been given the items temporarily for safekeeping. The humiliation of having to prove my own daughter had been robbed by her aunt was almost too much to bear, but beneath the shame was something stronger, a righteous fury that my child had been victimized by someone who should have protected her. This wasn't just about me anymore. Victoria had stolen from a baby, from someone who couldn't defend herself, and that crossed a line that demanded justice. As I sat surrounded by printed screenshots and documentation, the full picture of Victoria's betrayal finally came into focus. The favoritism, the isolation, the digital sabotage, the theft. Each piece was part of a larger campaign to push me out of the family entirely and claim everything for herself and her unborn child. She wanted to be the only daughter, the only grandchild provider, the sole heir to family resources and attention. And she'd been willing to destroy my career, my relationships, my daughter's inheritance, and my sanity to make it happen. The shocking scope of her vengeance against my mere existence was almost incomprehensible. But now I had the evidence, and I was about to become the investigator instead of the victim. Justice was no longer an abstract concept. It was a mission, and I was just getting started. I stopped crying and started documenting. Every screenshot, every email header, every receipt, every timestamp went into organized folders on my laptop, backed up in 3 different places because I wasn't taking any chances. Derek taught me how to read metadata, how to trace IP addresses, how to create a timeline that would be undeniable even to people who wanted to defend Victoria. My husband installed security cameras around our house, including doorbell footage that caught something we hadn't expected. Victoria, on 3 separate occasions, taking mail from our mailbox before we got home from work. We reported it to the Postal Service and saved every second of footage. The betrayal was now on video, time-stamped and irrefutable, showing her literally stealing correspondence that might have contained the invitations and information I'd been accused of ignoring. The investigation became my second job, something I worked on every evening after Lily went to sleep, hunched over my laptop with Derek on video call, following digital breadcrumbs that led back to Victoria again and again. We found the devices she'd used, matched locations to times when she'd had access to my information during family gatherings, traced the creation dates of fake accounts to specific events where I'd carelessly left my phone unattended or my passwords written in a notebook she could have photographed. Each discovery was both vindicating and horrifying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. But the systematic nature of her sabotage was worse than I'd imagined. This had been going on for years, not months. A long game of destruction I'd been completely blind to. Over the next few weeks, I reached out to a few trusted family members, carefully choosing people I knew Victoria couldn't have completely poisoned against me. My cousin Jennifer confessed that she'd been confused by messages supposedly from me canceling lunch dates, messages she now realized came from slightly different numbers or email addresses. My Aunt Angela admitted she'd found it strange when Victoria claimed I'd said harsh things about her behind her back because it didn't match the person she knew. Slowly, carefully, I started building a network of allies who were willing to look at evidence instead of blindly accepting Victoria's narrative. The truth was spreading, quietly but steadily, like cracks forming in a facade that had seemed solid, but was actually brittle underneath. But I couldn't just present the evidence haphazardly. I needed to be strategic, needed to think about how to reveal everything in a way that couldn't be dismissed or spun into another story where I was the jealous, unstable sister having a breakdown. Derek suggested we create a comprehensive presentation, a visual timeline with screenshots, videos, receipts, everything laid out so clearly that denial would be impossible. We worked on it for weeks, organizing the betrayal into a story anyone could follow. Here's where she impersonated me online. Here's where she stole my mail. Here's where she sabotaged my promotion. Here's where she sold Lily's inheritance. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, but presenting it wrong could still backfire. My husband worried I was becoming obsessed, that the investigation was taking over my life, and maybe I should just cut contact with Victoria and move on. But he didn't understand. This wasn't about obsession anymore. This was about dignity, about self-worth, about proving to myself and the world that I wasn't the problem, that I hadn't deserved any of this treatment, that I had value and my daughter had value and we deserved to be seen. Justice wasn't just about making Victoria face consequences. It was about reclaiming my narrative, taking back my story from someone who'd been rewriting it in poison ink for years. And I was so close to being ready. The final piece fell into place when Derek confirmed the access logs showing Victoria had been in my real email account dozens of times, including the exact date and time when that fake promotion refusal was sent from the look-alike address. The level of premeditation was chilling, but it also meant I had everything I needed. I'd gone from victim to investigator, and now it was time to plan how to present the truth. Victoria's husband's family was hosting a big celebration dinner in 2 weeks. Not her baby shower, but a formal family gathering before it. And something told me that was exactly when the truth needed to come out. I named the plan Operation Emma's Justice. Emma was Lily's middle name, after our grandmother, a tribute to the woman whose memory Victoria had dishonored. And this was about protecting her legacy as much as reclaiming my own. Derek, Jennifer, Angela, and my husband became my core team. People I could trust, people who'd seen enough evidence to understand this wasn't a petty family squabble, but something much darker. We met at my house one evening, spread all the documentation across my dining table, and started planning the confrontation. The goal wasn't just to expose Victoria, it was to do it so thoroughly, so calmly, so undeniably that she couldn't flip the narrative or make me look like the villain having an emotional breakdown. Jennifer suggested we rehearse what I'd say, how I'd present the information, what objections or defenses Victoria might throw up, and how I'd counter them. We role-played different scenarios. What if she cries? What if she claims she was hacked? What if our parents immediately take her side? What if she tries to leave before I finish? For each possibility, we crafted responses that were calm, factual, focused on evidence rather than emotion. Derek loaded everything onto a tablet that could cast to a TV screen, creating a presentation that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss as, she said. We timed it carefully, just enough to present the undeniable truth without dragging it out. The hardest part was managing my own emotions. Every time we rehearsed, I felt the anger rising, the humiliation threatening to crack my voice, the betrayal making my hands shake. My husband would squeeze my shoulder and remind me, calm and factual wins, emotional outbursts lose. We practiced my delivery until I could recite the worst moments of Victoria's sabotage in a steady voice, until I could show video of her stealing my mail without crying, until I could list every fake account and forged email like I was reading documented facts. The self-worth I was reclaiming came not from revenge, but from refusing to be gaslit anymore, from standing firm in the truth even when that truth was shocking and uncomfortable. We decided the location carefully, Not Victoria's main baby shower, but the family gathering 3 days before it. A dinner at my parents' house where Victoria would be present, but the focus wouldn't be entirely on her yet. Timing mattered. Late enough in the evening that people would be settled and couldn't easily escape. Early enough that we wouldn't seem like we were ambushing a celebration. Angela agreed to suggest a family toast that would give me the floor naturally. Jennifer positioned herself near the door to prevent any dramatic exits. Derek had the presentation ready on his phone to cast to my parents' smart TV. Every detail was planned, every contingency covered. The night before the confrontation, I barely slept, running through the presentation in my mind, double-checking that every piece of evidence was accessible and undeniable. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this, that my own sister hated me enough to spend years destroying my life, that my family had been so blind or complicit that this level of documentation was necessary to make them see. But another part of me felt a strange calm, a certainty that this was about truth, not revenge, that I was doing this for the right reasons. For Lily, for the facts, for my dignity. What Victoria was about to face wasn't cruelty. It was consequences, the natural result of her choices finally coming to light. As I kissed Lily goodnight and watched her sleep so peacefully, unaware of the family drama she'd been born into, I made a promise to her and to myself. Tomorrow night, everything would change. The lies would be exposed, the sabotage would be revealed, the theft would be documented, and Victoria would finally face the truth about who she'd become. Whether it would heal my family or shatter it completely, I couldn't know. But the silence and suffering had gone on long enough, and I was done being invisible. The truth was coming, and I was the one delivering it. The family dinner started normally enough. Too normally, which made my heart pound so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Victoria was glowing in a designer maternity outfit, holding court with stories about nursery renovations and baby name debates, while I sat quietly, watching, waiting for the right moment. People greeted me politely but distantly, like I was a +1 rather than family, which only reinforced why I was doing this. My father told jokes, my mother fussed over everyone's plates, and the whole scene had the surreal quality of watching a play where you know the twist ending but the actors don't. When dessert was served and Angela suggested we all share what we were grateful for this season, I knew it was time. I took a deep breath, felt my husband's hand squeeze mine under the table, and stood up with my phone in my hand. Before we start the gratitude circle, I need to talk about something important, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my legs. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me with confusion or curiosity, or, in Victoria's case, something that looked like sudden panic quickly masked with a smile. Dad, a few weeks ago at Victoria's baby shower, you said you were finally going to be a grandpa, but Lily is 6 months old. She's your granddaughter. The silence deepened, became uncomfortable, and I saw my father's face shift from confusion to embarrassment to defensiveness. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I held up my phone and said, and that comment made me start asking questions that uncovered something much bigger than favoritism or a careless moment. What I found was shocking, and everyone needs to see it. Derek cast my presentation to the TV screen, and suddenly the room was filled with evidence no one could look away from. Screenshots of fake social media accounts with my name. Email headers showing the fake promotion refusal sent from an address 1 letter different from mine, alongside access logs proving Victoria had been in my real email account. Doorbell footage of Victoria taking mail from our mailbox, her face clear as day, dated and time-stamped. The sold listings for grandmother's heirlooms that were supposed to be for Lily, with dates that matched Victoria's inventory access. During the estate audit my father's lawyer had conducted, they'd found bank records showing deposits to Victoria's account that lined up perfectly with those sales. The digital trail of impersonation, theft, and sabotage laid out in undeniable detail. I watched faces around the table move through denial to confusion to horror as they realized what they were seeing wasn't a jealous sister's fantasy, but documented reality. For years I thought I was the problem, I continued. my voice gaining strength as I saw the shock rippling through my family. I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't loved enough, wasn't present enough. But the truth is, I was being systematically erased. Victoria has been impersonating me online, sending fake emails that cost me a promotion, stealing my mail so I'd miss invitations and look like the selfish sister who couldn't be bothered with family. She sold heirlooms that were meant for Lily. Family treasures grandmother specifically listed for my daughter in her own handwriting, and pocketed the money. She's been running a campaign to destroy my reputation, my career, my relationships, and my daughter's legacy. This isn't jealousy. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is betrayal, sabotage, and theft. And I have every single piece documented. Victoria stood up so fast her chair fell backward, her face cycling through expressions too quickly to track. Shock, anger, fear, calculation. "This is insane," she said, but her voice cracked, betraying her. "You're having some kind of breakdown, making up these crazy—" But Derek cut her off by pulling up the metadata, the IP addresses that traced back to her devices, the timestamps that proved she couldn't claim she was hacked or framed. My mother gasped, actually gasped, when she saw the video of Victoria at our mailbox. My father sat frozen, his face pale, staring at the evidence of the silver tea set being sold online, an item he'd watched his mother polish every Sunday for decades. The golden child's facade was crumbling in real time, and no amount of charm or tears or deflection could put it back together. "I didn't want it to come to this," I said. And I meant it. Part of me had hoped there was another explanation, that Victoria wasn't capable of this level of calculated cruelty. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done letting my daughter be erased. I'm done paying the price for existing outside your perfect picture of what this family should look like. This ends tonight. Either you all see the truth and start treating me and Lily with the dignity we deserve, or I walk away knowing I did everything I could to prove I wasn't the problem. The room erupted in accusations and questions and denials. Victoria's husband demanded to see the evidence more closely. My father couldn't stop staring at the image of the sold tea set, and I stood there in the center of the chaos, finally vindicated. The truth had arrived. And it was both terrible and necessary. Victoria's husband was the first to break ranks. He pulled up the metadata on his own phone, cross-referencing the IP addresses with their home network, and his face went from defensive to devastated in seconds. "Oh my God," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Victoria, what did you do?" She tried to grab his phone, tried to explain, but the desperation in her movements only made her look more guilty. He stepped back from her like she was contagious, and I saw the moment he realized he didn't know the woman he'd married. Or worse, that he did know her, and had been willfully blind to who she really was. Within minutes, he'd called his parents and left the dinner, saying he needed time to process this. But the devastation in his eyes told me that marriage might not survive the night. My parents' reactions split them down the middle in ways I'd never seen. My mother kept trying to find explanations, suggesting Victoria must have been hacked, must have had reasons, must have been stressed. Anything to avoid accepting that her golden child was capable of such systematic cruelty. But my father just stared at the evidence, particularly my grandmother's handwritten list and the items being sold, and something in him broke visibly. "How could you?" he asked Victoria, his voice shaking with a mix of betrayal and rage I'd never heard from him. "Your grandmother trusted you. She loved you. And you stole from her great-granddaughter and sold her memory for money." Victoria tried to hug him, tried to explain, but he physically recoiled, and in that moment, I saw the pedestal he'd built for her crack into irreparable pieces. The family fracture happened in real time, relatives taking sides, demanding to see evidence, checking their own interactions with me to see if they'd been manipulated too. Jennifer revealed Victoria had told her I'd called her desperate and pathetic, when I'd never said anything of the sort. Angela produced messages supposedly from me that she now realized came from a fake number. Uncle Thomas admitted Victoria had shown him screenshots of mean texts I'd allegedly sent, screenshots he now understood were fabricated. Each revelation added weight to the truth, built a mountain of evidence that buried Victoria's lies under undeniable facts. The golden child wasn't just falling, she was imploding, and the destruction was both horrifying and necessary to witness. "I did it because you were never supposed to matter this much," Victoria finally screamed, and the whole room went silent. The confession came pouring out in a rush of jealousy and resentment I'd never imagined she was capable of. I was supposed to be the successful one, the beautiful one, the favorite. You were supposed to be the supporting character. But you kept succeeding, kept being happy, kept building this life that didn't revolve around me, and it wasn't fair. You didn't even care that they loved me more. You just lived your life like you deserved to be happy anyway, and I hated you for it." The raw honesty of her hatred was shocking, but it also validated every hurt I'd ever felt, confirmed that the betrayal wasn't accidental or misunderstood, but deliberate and malicious. The consequences started falling like dominoes. My father announced he was revising his will immediately, that Victoria's inheritance would be placed in trust for Lily, since she'd proven herself capable of theft and deception. My mother, torn between her daughters, could only cry silently as the family she'd tried to keep perfect disintegrated. In the following weeks, Victoria's husband filed for separation, citing the documented evidence in his filing. His lawyer advised protective steps given the level of deception that had been uncovered. Several relatives blocked Victoria on social media, cut contact, told anyone who'd listen about the sabotage and theft. Her reputation in the family and social circles collapsed, karma finally catching up with interest. But the most profound consequence was internal. Victoria had to face who she'd become, and she clearly hated the reflection. I saw it in her eyes during that dinner. The moment she realized the vengeance she'd pursued against my happiness had cost her everything real: her marriage, her family's trust, her self-respect, her future inheritance. The golden child had fallen, and the impact would echo through our family for generations. As I drove home that night, Lily sleeping peacefully in her car seat, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. The truth had been revealed, consequences delivered, facts exposed. But the family I'd fought to reclaim was forever changed, and I wasn't sure yet if that change would heal us or destroy us completely. What I did know was that Lily would never be erased again, and neither would I. The weeks and months following the confrontation brought consequences that even I hadn't fully anticipated, each one a testament to how thoroughly Victoria's carefully constructed life could unravel when built on lies. Her divorce proceedings moved forward. Her husband's lawyers had the documentation I'd compiled, and with evidence of fraudulent activity and theft, she had zero leverage for a favorable settlement. The prenup she'd once bragged about protecting her now worked against her, and she'd be lucky to get minimal spousal support given the documented sabotage. I couldn't believe how thoroughly everything fell apart for her, but then again, betrayal has a way of accelerating consequences when it's finally exposed to light. At work, I met with HR and my supervisor to present the evidence of the fake email that cost me the promotion. HR opened an investigation, and over the following month, not only was my name cleared, but I was offered the position I'd been denied along with a formal apology. They even suggested legal action against whoever had impersonated me, though I declined, knowing the family fallout was punishment enough and further legal battles would only prolong the drama. My colleagues, who'd been treating me strangely for months, suddenly understood why I'd seemed off, and the professional relationships I thought I'd lost began rebuilding themselves. The self-worth that had been systematically destroyed was returning, not because Victoria had fallen, but because the truth had proven I was never the problem. My father took the revelations hardest, consumed by guilt for years of favoritism and blindness that enabled Victoria's behavior. Over the following months, he set up a trust fund for Lily that matched what he'd spent on Victoria's wedding, education, and car combined. It wasn't about the money for me, but the acknowledgement, the tangible proof that Lily mattered, that she was valued, that her existence wasn't an afterthought. He started coming over weekly to spend time with his granddaughter, really seeing her for the first time. And while the relationship was awkward and new, it was real in a way nothing had been before. The humiliation of being invisible was transforming into the dignity of being seen, truly seen for who I'd always been. Victoria's social fallout extended beyond family. Friends who'd heard her version of events for years suddenly had questions, doubts, realizations that her stories never quite matched reality. Several people reached out to apologize for believing I was the difficult sister, the jealous one, the problem. Victoria moved back in with our mother. Her husband had kept their house, and the woman who'd once had everything now had less than I'd ever had, even in my hardest years. It should have felt like victory, like justice perfectly served. But mostly I felt a deep sadness for who she'd chosen to become and what she'd destroyed in pursuit of keeping me down. The inheritance situation got even more dramatic when our father's lawyer did a full audit of grandmother's estate. Several other valuable items were unaccounted for, and when pressed, Victoria finally admitted she'd been systematically taking and selling pieces for 2 years, not just the ones meant for Lily. The total came to over $40,000, money she'd spent on her lifestyle, her renovations, her designer clothes, all while playing the victim about money stress. Dad not only redirected her entire inheritance to a trust for Lily and Victoria's unborn child, but also demanded repayment, threatening legal action if she didn't comply. Karma had arrived with a bill, and Victoria was paying in every currency that mattered. The most shocking twist came months later when, during the divorce proceedings, Victoria's husband discovered she'd been manipulating the timeline of her pregnancy. She'd told everyone she was further along than she actually was when she'd thrown that lavish first shower, using it as a celebration she claimed was early because of scheduling conflicts and my high-risk status. She'd shown him ultrasound images that weren't current, and had created an elaborate story to trap him emotionally before he could uncover her behavior. When that deception came out during mediation, his lawyers used it as further evidence of her pattern of manipulation, and Victoria lost even the sympathy she might have gotten. Everything she'd built on lies collapsed, and I watched from a careful distance, not celebrating her downfall, but acknowledging that justice doesn't always look pretty, and sometimes consequences are simply the natural result of choices catching up to the person who made them. The truth was finally free, and while it had destroyed Victoria's carefully crafted world, it had liberated mine. 6 months after the confrontation, I found myself sitting on the porch of a house I'd just purchased. Nothing extravagant, but mine, truly mine, without my parents' help or anyone's judgment. Lily was playing in the yard with my husband, her laughter carrying on the breeze, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt peace settle into my bones. The family drama hadn't disappeared completely. Healing takes longer than destruction. But the difference was that I was no longer invisible, no longer fighting to prove my worth to people who should have seen it all along. The reclaiming of my dignity hadn't come from Victoria's fall, but from my refusal to accept less than I deserved, and that shift changed everything. My relationship with my father transformed into something neither of us had experienced before. Honesty. He admitted the favoritism, owned his role in enabling Victoria's behavior, and started doing the work to understand why he'd valued one daughter's comfort over the other's humanity. We went to family therapy together, just us, not the whole family. And in those sessions, he confronted biases and patterns he'd inherited from his own childhood. Watching him actively choose to be better, to see me fully, to build a real relationship with Lily, didn't erase the years of pain, but it offered something I'd thought impossible: hope that families could change, could heal, could choose truth over comfort. My career flourished in ways I'd been too focused on survival to imagine possible. The promotion led to speaking opportunities at nursing conferences, a leadership position that came with real influence, and the respect of colleagues who saw me as competent and trustworthy rather than unstable or difficult. The betrayal that had threatened to destroy my professional life ended up revealing my resilience, and that resilience became my greatest asset. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped minimizing my achievements, stopped accepting less because I was afraid of being seen as demanding. The infidelity to my own needs and worth ended when I decided my happiness mattered as much as anyone else's. Victoria and I don't speak. Her baby was born healthy, and I heard through family that she's slowly rebuilding a life on much more modest terms, working and parenting and dealing with the long-term consequences of her choices. Part of me hopes she finds genuine happiness someday, that she does the work to understand why she needed to destroy me to feel valuable. But that's her journey, not mine. I've set boundaries that protect Lily from toxic dynamics, made it clear to family that any relationship with us comes with respect and acknowledgement of the past. And I've stopped waiting for closure or apologies that may never come. Justice, I learned, isn't always about the other person facing consequences. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself from the need for their validation. The most profound healing came from unexpected places. Extended family members who'd been manipulated into distancing themselves reached out with genuine apologies and curiosity about rebuilding relationships. My cousin Jennifer became one of my closest friends, someone who understood the complexity of loving a family while acknowledging its toxicity. I connected with other women online who'd experienced similar family betrayal, and sharing our stories, our survival strategies, our victories, created a community that validated what I'd been through. The shame that had consumed me for years, the belief that being unloved meant being unlovable, evaporated in the presence of people who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Looking at Lily now, watching her grow confident and loved and seen, I know the fight was worth it. She'll never question whether she matters, never wonder if her existence is an inconvenience, never accept being treated as less than she deserves. Breaking the cycle of favoritism and emotional manipulation wasn't just about exposing Victoria or confronting my parents. It was about giving my daughter a different story, a better foundation, a family culture that values truth and dignity over comfort and image. The karma that brought Victoria down also lifted me up, and while the path was more painful than I could have imagined, the destination is sweeter than anything I dared dream. I've reclaimed not just my reputation or relationships, but my entire sense of self, and that's a kind of justice no one can take away. So that's my story. From invisible daughter to investigator to someone who finally reclaimed her dignity and her daughter's legacy. But now I want to hear from you, because I know I'm not the only one who's lived through family betrayal that cut deeper than any stranger's knife ever could. Have you ever been the forgotten child? The one who watched favoritism play out in real time while everyone told you it was all in your head? Have you discovered lies that made you question your entire childhood, your relationships, your sense of reality itself? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community has become a place where we validate each other's pain and celebrate each other's victories. Here's what I really want to know, and be honest, because there's no judgment here. Do you think what I did was justice or revenge? Where's the line between exposing someone's betrayal and taking payback too far? Some people tell me I should have just walked away quietly, that confronting Victoria publicly was cruel, that I should have been the bigger person and let karma handle it naturally. But others say I did exactly what needed to be done, that silent suffering only enables toxic people to keep hurting others, that sometimes justice requires a public reckoning. What do you think? Was I wrong to expose everything in front of the family? Or was that the only way to stop the lies and protect my daughter from future harm? And here's the harder question that keeps me up at night sometimes. If you were in my position, what would you have done differently? Would you have gathered evidence like I did? Or would you have confronted Victoria the moment you suspected something? Would you have involved the whole family, or kept it private? Would you have pushed for consequences like the will changes and divorce? Or would you have focused only on clearing your name? I'm genuinely curious because every family betrayal is different. Every situation has its own complexity, and maybe your perspective will help someone else reading this who's going through something similar right now. If this story resonated with you, if you've felt invisible, backstabbed, cheated, or humiliated by people who were supposed to love you, you're not alone, and your experience matters just as much as mine. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not crazy, that favoritism and family sabotage are real, and that reclaiming your dignity is possible even when it feels impossible. Leave a comment telling me what part of this story hit hardest for you, because knowing I'm not alone in this has been the most healing part of sharing my truth. Let's build a community where we hold each other up instead of tearing each other down. And please, if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about karma, justice, family drama, betrayal, and people who refused to stay silent when their worth was denied, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share these intense, real-life experiences because I believe we learn more from each other's struggles than from pretending everything's perfect. There are so many more stories of shocking revelations, public reckonings, and people who chose their dignity over fake family peace, and I promise every single one will make you think differently about loyalty, revenge, and what it really means to fight for your self-worth. So tell me, what's your story? What's the betrayal you've survived? What's the justice you're still seeking? Comment below, share with your friends, subscribe for more stories that don't sugarcoat the reality of toxic families. And let's keep this conversation going, because the more we talk about this, the more we expose favoritism and sabotage for what they really are, the harder it becomes for golden children to keep destroying their siblings in silence. Your voice matters, your experience is valid, and I can't wait to read what you have to say. Thanks for watching, and remember, being loved less never meant you deserved less. It just meant they were too blind to see your worth.